Yeah, for those who don't know, Butch Hartman is the creator of quite a few shows that you probably recognize from your childhood. Fairly Odd Parents, Danny Phantom, Tough Puppy. There's probably others, but those are the ones that I know. And he is a Christian, I know that much. He did like a Kickstarter thing to start his own network, like a streaming service, and then people got mad because it may have been like somewhat Christian, and he didn't reveal that up front. I don't remember. It's a whole thing. I don't even know if that streaming service ended up getting made. So.
Hello, chat.
So yeah, I guess let's find out which Butch Hartman and his wife believe.
Hey guys, it's me, Julianne Hartman, and I'm so excited to present to you
Oh god, apparently they can't get a decent microphone. Yuck.
a full-length version of Deborah McDermott's healing journey. This is about her two sons that were both diagnosed with autism. They are now completely healed and living amazing
Hey,
lives.
Jake.
Check
Yes,
this
I
out.
am very moist. My hair is yet to dry.
We were and had been for a very long time in a place of crisis as a family.
I want to know who the director of this was, or whoever was editing it, and they're like, we need to make this look dramatic. Let me pull out the blur filter and also sepia tone so it looks like this is happening in the Old West. It's like an episode of Bonanza.
We were and had been for a very long time in a place of crisis as a family.
And I
Oh
was
no,
very, very
do they
tired.
believe
I
that
came to the
Jesus
point-
can cure the tism? That's not good.
I thought I would go mad or drop.
No one understands you from the outside. No one had any idea about the kind of life that we were living.
Then I cracked.
This better not end up being MMS. I'm gonna be so mad if Butch Hartman is into, like, gross feeding your autistic kid
Pretty much
bleach.
since Tim had been born, had lived not a normal life. He didn't sleep properly for about 5-6 years.
He was an inconsolable baby. He would scream and scream as
It has 110 down votes to 16 up votes, so it must be
though he
bad.
was in pain, but the doctors couldn't find anything wrong with him.
When he did go to sleep, we were absolutely terrified he was going to wake up. We couldn't leave him, we couldn't go anywhere, we couldn't be apart from him. So for many, many years, that's the way that we lived. It was very, very tough on us, our relationship, because we didn't have any time for ourselves. For a long time, there was not a lot of intimacy, there was not a lot of emotional connection because of the crisis that we were in as a family.
Okay, I'm sure raising an autistic child can be tough and have a whole series of obstacles that don't come along with a kid that's more neurotypical, but that doesn't change the fact that you're their parent and there is no cure for autism, so you need to deal with that and not make up some bullshit cure. Oh
When he
no.
was about 8 or 9, and he hadn't been to school because we realized that he would have been diagnosed with hyperactivity or a lack of ability to concentrate, because we could.
Okay, but not taking him to school isn't going to stop him from having those things. If he has that, he has that. And he should be diagnosed and properly medicated if it's found that that would help the child function.
See, he couldn't even sit down to eat a meal. He would run around the table, take a mouthful, run around the table. And
Okay, he probably has a hyperactivity disorder. He probably has ADD or something.
when I taught him his numbers, we would do it in the garden. I'd ask him a sum as he ran up the garden, and he'd answer coming down the garden. And this is how I taught him. He never sat on my lap or lay in bed while I had a bedtime story. He would walk round the carpet, touching his favourite bits, going round and round and round. And as long as I would keep reading, he'd just keep walking round and round, touching his favourite bits. Everything was timed, so he knew where he was in the day, what was going to happen next, and the routine had to be very structured. His sleeping had always been a huge issue. He'd wake up after he'd been asleep for an hour or two, and he would jump up screaming in terror and run around the house, but he didn't recognize me. If I went towards him to comfort him, he would see me as a monster or something, and he would be terrified, so it was counterproductive. I just have to stand back and wait for him to calm down. It was just another one of the things that we just dealt with and didn't think much about.
At least they aren't
But it was
blaming
quite an issue.
vaccines so far. That's good.
When we had James, many people had said to us, "You'll surely not get another child who sleeps as badly as Timmy did."
I noticed one or two strange things when he got to be 18 months, and then he started spinning round and round, moving his head round, and when I changed his nappy, he'd flap, 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 flap. And then instead of pushing the cars, we had Action Man cars, big ones, he'd turn them upside down and spin the wheels for ages. So there were a few little odd things, but not enough to really, I would just facilitate his peculiarities and thought it was okay. But when he stopped talking and he stopped communicating, and then he stopped liking people look at him.
Okay, he probably has autism. This is when you take your child to a proper medical person so that they can check them out, and if they do have autism, they can provide you with materials in order to teach you how to make sure that your kid can grow up with the aid that they may need, and to make sure that you raise them in such a way that's most conducive to the way that their brain works. You don't just ignore this and be like, oh, woe is me, it's a problem. Like, okay, then go get a solution to the problem so you can make sure that your child has the best possible outcomes.
And he became distressed with light, and then he stopped eating foods. And if there was even the smallest lump in his morning porridge, he'd gag and vomit it up. Then we had a...
Okay, and at this point, did you take him to a doctor? Because if you didn't, then you should have CPS called on you, because your child is suffering so badly that they're unable to eat, and you're refusing to do anything about it in terms of educating yourself on how to deal with the child with this sort of issue.
Speech and language therapist come in to assess Timothy. And there were two of them, and they were chatting to Tim, trying to put him at ease and stuff, and then chatting to me to report back what they had found. And they were watching James, who was playing with his trains. He loved trains, it was his favourite toy. Anyway, what they said to me was, "Oh, isn't it funny how autistic kids love trains?" And I said, "Autistic kids?" So she says, "Well, it's obvious, isn't it?"
That's almost a Curb Your Enthusiasm moment where you're like revealing to some parent that their kid is autistic, but you don't realize that they don't realize.
You did know, didn't you? I said, "No, he's not autistic." So she says, I think you should perhaps have him assessed. He shows a number of autistic characteristics." And that's the first I had even thought of it. I was absolutely gutted.
In the days following this 2005 assessment, Timothy was tested and diagnosed with a form of autism called Asperger's syndrome, while his younger brother James exhibited all the symptoms of autistic spectrum disorder.
And we suddenly realised that, gosh, we were going to have two children that got it, and what were the chances of that?
It is incurable. It is.
I did know
I also
that I was
think
really
classifying
I
it,
wasn't living a normal life
saying
myself.
it
I'd
like
lost
that treats
touch
it
of
like
who
a
I was. I
disease,
just
which is
functioned
not like a
24 hours
great
a
way to
day
go
as
about
caring
it.
for these boys.
So I was ploughing a lot
Like,
of
I
my
understand
energies
it can
into
create
my
a
job
great
because
deal
I
of
needed to make
difficulty
sure
for
that
people
was
with it,
successful to be able
but
to support the family.
people with
That meant
autism can
travelling
also
a
be
lot.
incredibly
And I thought
good
if anyone
at certain
found out my
things that
state of mental health,
neurotypical
they'd take
people
the
are
children
not,
away.
so...
I was absolutely terrified of them taking the children away, but I was also terrified that I couldn't go on. And that's when I cried out to the Lord. I said, if you don't help me now, I'm finished.
The incredible pressure and the incredible trauma that you undergo as a family. You have to watch your children, the things you love most in the world, battling not just with the the curse that they've got, but also being rational enough to know that they've got it. And it was those periods in which Debs found it the most hard, in which she had the darkest days. And it was during one of those dark, dark days that she watched the Mother's Day programme.
They were all mums talking about their kids, and they were showing snapshots and pictures and talking about which ones are doing what at school, and they were chatting. And it just hit me like a sledgehammer that what I'm experiencing and what they're experiencing are just so different. And I was weeping, and then I said, you know, why don't you help us? I had been asking God help me for years. And I said, I love my boys so much, and you're supposed to love them more than me. Why have you done this to them? And I said, I would die for my boys. And that's when he said, I already did. I was so stunned. I just shut up. I stopped crying. I just looked into the fireplace and I just stared there. I thought, that really wasn't my thought. That was Jesus talking to me.
Okay, go to a doctor. Go to a psychologist if you're legitimately hearing voices. This shit irks me to no end. No, you did not hear the voice of Jesus. My goodness. And if you're religious, that's one thing. I'm not here to talk about that today. That's a whole other topic. Like, whatever. If you're religious, that's your business. But you are not hearing the voice of God. You are not hearing the voice of God. It's you. It's your thoughts. You're projecting thoughts into your own brain and then identifying them as coming from somewhere else when that is not the case. Please, if you are legitimately hearing voices that you do not identify as your own inner voice and you're hearing them regularly, seek help. This is not normal. This is not even normal religious stuff. This is like schizophrenia. You do not hear voices in your head that are not your own.
And that's when I knew that they were all right. And I thought, well, he'll heal them. I just sat there and stared at the fireplace. The tears went, the pain went, the anxiety went, the fears went, everything that had worried.
What are we watching? We're watching a video promoted by Butch Hartman's wife about, like, God curing someone's autism or something. It's the most ridiculous shit.
Me over the past number of years, it was like a huge load was just cut away, and I was free, and I felt light, and I just sat and stared into that fireplace. And from that moment on, that despair, that terror, the anxiety that I'd lived with was gone.
When Timothy went to the school that was funded by the state, it was a really huge thing for us, but we felt that he was actually quite capable of doing it.
And as he progressed and as they increased the number of hours he went, he was up for it. And I believe that the healing just took place gradually as and when his world opened up and became wider and he needed to cope with more and more things.
The school helped him, dummy. The school that was specifically that he was put in order to help him with his Asperger's, and I'm sure they helped him to learn coping mechanisms and ways to deal with his, like, sensory differences and the way that he, like, interacts with people. That's what made the change. It wasn't magic. My God.
It's almost as if he was covered in scales. He was covered in the scales of autism, and over time those scales have been peeled away.
Fuck you! How dare you describe autism like that? That's sick. They're your fucking kids. Fuck you.
And
I know that's not substantive commentary, but, like, fuck these people, right? This is gross.
Say, Lord, please send me someone to help me. I know you're healing my boys, but I don't know what to do.
Okay, they're not being healed by Jesus. They're going to a school where they're being taught ways to deal with their differences, ways to deal with how their brain functions differently than a lot of other people in society. They're being taught these things. Are you not engaging with what your children are being taught at all? Like, do they just go to school and they come home and you're never like, oh, what did you learn at school today? Timmy or whatever the heck the kid's name was. Like, ugh.
And that was where we were at when my mum phoned and said, watch Andrew Womack. He's got some healing testimonies and you've got to watch it.
And we all watched it together, and it was just extraordinary. And even that, you sit and watch it and you think, well, is it really true?
We had missed the beginning of Hannah's story, but we came in, and from where we saw was enough to see what had taken place with Hannah's story. And the bit that struck me and was when he said, piece of cake for Jesus.
Piece of cake for Jesus.
This is a piece of cake for Jesus.
And this smile crept across his face. And
Never in the history of Christianity have there been documented cases of people actually being cured religiously. I'm not telling you you can't believe in your religion. It's fine. But you need to deal with reality on top of that, right? No one has faith healed anyone ever. You can watch TV specials on how faith healing is done. Darren Brown has a whole, hour-and-a-half long special on it. There are multiple people who have covered these topics. Faith healing is a grift. It is fake. You are being scammed. These are not people that represent what your religion should be. These are charlatans using your faith as a way to con you. Do not believe these people.
I was like, that's awesome. This guy really believes this, doesn't he? You know, and that faith on the inside of us rose up.
So Father, Jamie and I just agree. And we thank you that by the stripes of Jesus, Hannah has already been...
Fuck this guy. Who's this guy? This guy's fucking trash. What the hell is this guy's name? Thank you to, look at this dog and cat for following. Welcome to the stream. Oh, God, what is this shitbag? Oh, good. At least all the comments are negative. They act so shocked that their autistic children show less problematic symptoms as they grow up, but that's exactly it. It's called growing up for a reason. Even if they don't mature exactly like everyone else, they're still capable of learning, just like many children with ASD. You can argue that God guided them on a path of wisdom and all that. In fact, me and my family have a similar story, so I won't judge there. But to call the experience, quote, carrying autism is incredibly insensitive to those who continue to struggle with their own ASD into adulthood. Autism is a mental handicap, not a disease, and yes, I know what the doctor said, but there's still room for error. The important part of the diagnosis isn't that their autism is, quote, gone, because it could always pop up again in some form or another, but that it's developed to a point where extensive treatment for their autism is no longer necessary, and that's a fair miracle in and of itself, Laserleaf Storm says. These fucking people. Trash.
healed.
It just, my faith just rose up.
Any idea when I'm going to start Behind the Mask? Oh, Behind the Mask is where I'm going to be going into, the private, Facebook groups and forums of people like John Doyle and Liberty Hangout to see if I can find any really sick racist shit. Basically, when I get paid from Twitch next month, is when I'm going to start.
Side of me. And I thought, yes, he's talking about my God, my one. And that's when Christopher
Careless Whiskers, thanks for following. Cool name.
Out the website.
We researched Hannah and her story, and we found out about Hannah's grandparents and Hannah.
This guy is Andrew Womack Ministries. Andrew Womack. I'll just have to Google it. Andrew Womack. Andrew Womack. Andrew Womack Ministries. Watch the Gospel Truth TV broadcasts here. Oh, God. Oh, they have a Bible college. Lovely. Let me see if I can just find him on YouTube. We can take a look at him after we finish this video.
Mum and Dad going to live in America, and the grandparents going to the college in Warsaw. It didn't just have an impact on Hannah, it had an impact on this incredible family, and they'd all experienced it, and they'd all gone through this process. And again, you're then thinking to yourself, wow, you know, maybe this is all true. Maybe this is really happening. And from that point on, started to watch Andrew Womack every day. But we bought all his books, or as many books as we could get. Started to record his programs on the internet. And we started to build up a kind of trust, I suppose, in what he was saying and in what he was saying.
You're describing being brought into a con. You've been conned. You're describing buying into like a con artist's grift.
We could have.
And he shouted from the study, he's going to be in Warsaw in 2 weeks. So I thought, well, we'll just have to pray about it. So I phoned Andrew Womack Ministries and I spoke to a woman there and I told her the situation. I said, look, we want to come. We want Andrew to pay for our sons, but we just need some help to get there. And I remember she said to me, what can you believe for? I think we can get there, but I'm not sure that I can exercise my faith enough to see us getting into the building. So she said, that's fine, we'll get you there, and if we can't get them out the car, we'll send a prayer team to the car. I thought, yes.
Gross.
She prayed in a way that I had never heard before. And it was great, it was authoritative, it was thanking God that it was done, it was commanding, and I thought, now we're talking. I have not heard this kind of praying. And I was so thrilled, I put down the phone and I said, she said that this is going to happen and this is going to happen and we're going to sleep and he's going to eat. And Christopher was like, yeah, she's never met my son. And for the next 2 weeks, I made a calendar counting down. This is when we're going to go and stay in a hotel. And he would cry every time I said it's another day. And when I said, no, we're going, he'd get in a spinning chair and he'd spin and spin and spin. And he'd refuse to come out for hours sometimes. But the day came and he wept and he wept and he physically was trying not to get into the car. It was hard work. But I just sat down and I prayed about it and I said, Lord, they said that he'd be able to get in the car and that he'd be fine and that you'd calm him and comfort him and all would be well. And so we're coming. And it was amazing because he just smiled up and said, okay, I'm ready, let's go. And we strapped him in and he sat there. Christopher and I just kept looking at each other and sort of holding our breath. It was amazing. We booked into the hotel and he was bouncing on the bed. He was really excited, like this is an adventure. And once again, Timothy was like, he couldn't believe it. And we said, okay, we're going to go and eat at the Kentucky Fried.
Okay, so to be clear, prior to going, you describe events like him spinning in a chair over and over and over as negative, like he doesn't want to go, and that's a negative thing, showing that his autism is bad. But then when you get to the hotel to go to the event, he's bouncing on the bed, another sort of hyperactive activity akin to spinning in a chair, but because you already are looking for a bias, you have a bias in your head to say, this is a good thing, this is going to solve things, you view that hyperactive activity as a positive. Do you see the issue at play here? You've already framed things in such a way as to always assume that whatever's happening prior is bad, but what's happening now is good. It's a very selective bias. Verkanon, thank you for continuing your subscription.
Chicken that the Terradez ate at. So we were off to the Kentucky Fried Chicken. And that's when Timothy ordered himself some popcorn chicken. We didn't know what to order, James, so we thought, well, we won't bother with anything because if we offer him food and he doesn't like it, he starts heaving. Sat down and he looked at the food. There was no heaving, there was no watery eyes and that he would normally have with cooking smells. He sat there, he looked at the popcorn chicken.
Okay, you're at a KFC. It's a completely different scenario from sitting at home, right?
I said, what's that? And he said, it's something called popcorn chicken. He said, oh, chicken. And he had one. He said, Timmy, mine. And he ate. And when he was finished it, he said, more. He ate a second lot.
This is before you even go and see the faith healer. All you're doing is showing that your kid is capable, despite the fact that they happen to be autistic, that they're capable of enjoying certain foods. Kids like fast food, autistic or not. I don't understand what you're trying to illustrate here, and it flies in the face of the point you're about to try and make. Because he hasn't seen the faith healer yet. You idiot.
He probably ate more than I'd ever seen him eat in one sitting, ever. He ate the chips, he ate the chicken. And Christopher and I were just laughing and said, it's a miracle. miracle and we haven't even got there yet. And it was an answer to prayer. It was what she had prayed was happening. And so then we got to the meeting and he was absolutely fine to come out the car. We sat in the coffee shop. It was tea time and there was this long queue of people. They wanted Andrew to sign books or pray for them and what have you. I called Christopher and he got James and all four of us stood in that queue. And I was moving slowly along and there were about 5 people in front of us when Andrew said, right, it's time to get back, tea break's over. Will everyone please go and sit down? I was like, no. And I started crying. It was like the taps just opened. I thought, no, I'm not going home now. I'm not, I can't go home now. I said, oh Lord, help me. I'm not going home without this man praying for my sons. And then that was when Paul Flanagan saw us.
I can't even imagine the weird cognitive dissonance it would have to be to believe in a God that won't help your son when you pray for him, but this random asshole who makes money doing it, he has the power to pray for your son and for God to heal him. What would that have to say about the God you believe in? Ugh.
And he grabbed us and he shoved us in front of Andrew and said, Andrew, just one more. And he said, right, okay, one more. And we told him the situation and he said a prayer, something along the lines. It was literally as quick as this. He rebuked autism and he commanded healing. And then he blessed us as a family and he thanked the Lord that we were blessed and that we would, something along the lines of fulfill the God's plan for our lives. And then he said to Christopher and I, and this was so huge, he said to Christopher and I, you are now the parents of normal, healthy children.
Fuck you! I really hope these kids grow up and don't get a complex out of this because of their shitbag parents. Legitimately. I hope that they're able to, grow up and mature and deal with them the best that they can, and understand that the bullshit their parents are peddling about how they are is not the case.
And everything happened so quickly. I remember hearing that like the whole world went quiet and it was just these words. It was, to me, and I still believe it was Jesus talking to me. And so that was a promise. That was a promise. That was for me. And I knew that he was right. And I was so moved. And we just slipped out the side door, got in the car, and we went to McDonald's where James ate the chicken nuggets and the chips. I think he'd never eaten he'd never eaten. And we went home. He went across the road to the little...
Okay, is it possible... And again, this is obvious, but I can't believe this woman doesn't see this. Okay, first of all, kids like fast food. Fast food is like a fun thing for kids. It's advertised to them all the time. I think they're more comfortable with it. Also, chicken is a pretty safe food usually for kids, especially if it's like, chicken tenders, chicken nuggets, something like that. Also, you aren't sitting down necessarily at some time at home and making a whole big thing out of the fact that you made dinner, which could stress your kid out, which could make them feel that there's pressure on them to be eating, whatever. I'm assuming you also didn't order your kid food off the bat like you did at KFC, which is also weird. So your kid felt comfortable enough that they're like, okay, I'm hungry, I'll eat some food. This food looks good. And they did so. Obviously your kid has eaten food before. They're alive. So this isn't some bizarro thing where your kid never eats food. Just because they have problems sometimes doesn't mean that they're incapable of enjoying a meal. MW1642, thank you for gifting a sub. I appreciate that.
Girl who he had known but hadn't played with for over a year invited her round and they played in the sandpit, on the trampoline in the garden. He played for the rest of the afternoon and that was the time that night that he had the first complete, full, peaceful, unbroken night's sleep.
Your kid's probably tired because he's probably exhausted because it was a very, how do I put this, probably stressful day for him. He had to get out of his comfort zone. He wasn't at home or in his normal schedule. He was out traveling and eating different kinds of food and meeting different kinds of people. He was in a faith healing environment that's full of a lot of like sights and sounds and people that are unfamiliar. He's probably exhausted, so he couldn't like not sleep when he got home. There are completely rational explanations for everything you're saying without jumping to the ridiculous conclusion that God used a faith healer to cure your kid's autism, which is a really fucked up thing to say in the first place.
Since the day he was born. And he was 5 years old at that point.
But when 3 months later, he's still sleeping well, when 6 months later, when a year later, 2 years later, he's still sleeping well, and he's starting to become the child that you thought, that you knew was there, but you couldn't reach because of autism.
Okay, autistic kids can develop and learn to cope with some of the sensory issues that they have, learn to come out of their shells, and be perfectly functional members of society like everyone else. The way that they're, like, demonizing autism is so fucked here. Like, do you know any autistic people? They aren't monsters. They aren't completely incapable of existing in the real world. Like, yeah, it can be rough developmentally, but, like, they grow up like everyone else. You psychos.
You believe in it and believe in the process. And those experiences have allowed us to start to live a more normal life. So for me, it was very important for us to take the boys back to the psychologists, the people who diagnosed them in the first place, because we knew there was something wrong with them, but we didn't label them Asperger's and autism. That was done by the professionals. He was taken to see the psychologist, and she spent an hour with him, an hour and a half chatting to him, and at the end of it, there was no battle, there was no fight. It was patently obvious that he wasn't the boy that had been diagnosed all those years ago. And what they said in the official medical report, confidential medical report from the NHS trust where we lived, was that Timothy is a neurodevelopmentally typical young man, and the label of Asperger's syndrome is not applicable. He has been discharged from my care. And that...
Okay, it seems that he's probably just on the spectrum if he was diagnosed with it at a younger age, or it was a misdiagnosis initially, which could happen. Or he could just be on the spectrum, and as an adult he has found himself able to cope very well and develop into someone who doesn't show a lot of outward signs of Asperger's, but that's a thing that can happen. A 1-hour appointment with the NHS isn't going to definitively tell you whether or not your kid has a thing that they may have, right? Dude Spanking Dude says, as someone on the autistic spectrum, I have Asperger's. I'm sensitive to certain noises, like someone clicking their tongue and stuff drives me up a fucking wall. Yeah.
That is, to see it written down, to see it, and I know this sounds awful, but to see it official really, really brings it home. So, as James developed and as James came out of his illness and came out of his disease, we wanted to do the same as well. And we were expecting probably an even worse fight with James, because we thought, again, we're going to take on the might of the state here, and these professionals aren't keen on being proven wrong, particularly with something like autism, because it is regarded as being something that can't be cured.
Your NHS doctor has absolutely no interest in whether or not they're proving the state right in their previous diagnosis, you psycho. They're just trying to do their job. And once again, a 1-hour appointment with a psychologist from the NHS that's never dealt with your kid before is not going to be able to give you a comprehensive diagnosis. That's not a thing. Ridiculous.
And so when we went to see the psychologist, she said, well, this is wrong. This diagnosis is obviously not applicable to him. He's a normal boy. He's perfectly capable of dealing and being what you would regard as normal. So she wrote in her official confidential psychology report that we only had last week, as a result of our discussions and my interactions and observations with James during our appointment, it is clear there has been significant progress over time in all areas associated with the triad of impairment with autism, As a result, the label autism spectrum disorder is no longer appropriate for James and should be removed from any documentation in the future that relates to him.
They're not saying he's cured of autism. What that individual psychologist is saying is that they don't feel the original diagnosis was appropriate. So it's entirely possible your kids didn't actually have these things and they had some other disorder that wasn't diagnosed appropriately. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I am not a doctor. But neither are you. So to try and claim that what at best is a misdiagnosis is somehow proof of a cure of autism, again in quotes because I wouldn't use that term, it's mind-bogglingly stupid. It's sick.
And you just, you know, you can't, when I read that, I just want to start crying really, because it's not just what we've experienced. And it's not just that we know it, but because this is now official, it means that forever and ever. So when we've gone, when the boys are men, when they're old and they're grey, they will not have this with them. They will not have carried this burden that they've had to carry in their young lives. They are
Fuck you! As if it would matter. Who cares?
are free of it. And the authorities, if you like, have recognised that as well. And they won't be persecuted or hindered in any way for what has happened when they were children. And I suppose for us, well, for me certainly, that's...
I'm very concerned at some point one of the kids, either the older or the younger, I'm a little bit more concerned about the younger, is going to face some new issue involving the potential that they do have some sort of spectrum, disorder, and they're going to face some difficulty involving that, and their parents are going to refuse to address that and get them help for whatever issue it might be, specifically because they refuse to accept that this thing wasn't magically fixed by Jesus. Very scary. M the Ambassador 19 with 100 bits. What this tells me is that this guy sees autistic people as lesser. Fuck him, yeah. Ditto. Fuck this guy.
The best thing that we could do for them, the best thing that we can do for both boys is to give them a future that we didn't think that they were going to have. And this gives us that future.
That's some sick shit.
Sometimes you have to pinch yourself to think, well, I'm actually with the same two children, that were born to me, because the change in the way that we play and the change in the way that they relate to me is very pronounced.
And I used to dream about all four of us going out to dinner together and not worrying about anything, just like a normal family. I used to dream that if we were invited out to other people's houses, we'd all just go and it would be fine. There wouldn't no fallout, nothing. We'd just be able to go. I used to dream about going to the cinema and eating popcorn, and boys eating popcorn and watching a movie together as a family. None of these things had we ever done before, but we went to the cinema, we bought the popcorn, we did it just as I had imagined. We are a normal family, and I am the mother of normal, healthy children, just like Andrew said.
Fucking disgusting. Fuck you, lady. You should not have had kids. You should not have had kids if you weren't willing to love and accept and nurture them regardless of who they were. Fuck you.
So that's it. Happy, happy.
That's sick. Sick, sick shit. And that was being promoted by this lady who is Butch Hartman's wife.
Hello, I'm Julianne Hartman, and welcome to the Healing Journeys Today YouTube channel. We are so excited you're here. If you're dealing with any sickness in your body or in your mind, then you've come to the right place. All of our speakers have come through illnesses, conditions, and life-threatening diseases where they tried everything they knew to get well. Well, when nothing else worked, they turned to
We will move on. I just wanted to see what else they had for future bullshit to look at. Ugh. So gross.